Tolkien notoriously, quote, disliked Dune with some intensity, but where he gave detailed reasons for disliking things like the Chronicles of Narnia and Disney movies, Tolkien chose to, quote, keep silent and refuse to comment more about Dune. But within weeks of writing these words, Tolkien was interviewed about his opinions on science fiction, providing detailed criticisms that match up suspiciously well with Dune. We have evidence to suggest that Tolkien disapproved of Dune on nearly every criteria that was important to him, ranging from language to religion to morality itself. And given Tolkien's internet reputation as a man whose biggest hobby seems to have been disliking things, you might expect him to have also disliked science fiction. But that simply isn't true. Tolkien was a fan of Isaac Asimov and admired how sci-fi's, quote, legendary laboratory professor has replaced the wizard. But what broke Tolkien's immersion was how sci-fi mistreated the one science he spent his life studying: language. In contrast to his own meticulously constructed Elvish, Tolkien criticized the, quote, childishly invented names and words of science fiction.
By Grabthar's hammer, what a savings.
But on the surface, Dune might seem like a great exception to this. Its author, Frank Herbert, said,
yeah, but I write science fiction for people who don't read science fiction.
Instead of inventing clunky new words, Dune borrows a lot of its language from real history, pulling terms like Kwisatz Haderach from Hebrew, Shai Hulud from Arabic, Landsrod from Dutch. Dune treats languages like a spice cabinet, peppering in terms to create an added sense of realism. But to someone like Tolkien, who spent his life studying how languages actually converge over time, it likely felt messy. He was frustrated by how, quote, few science fiction writers know anything about language's phonetics, history, or process of change. But it gets worse. At the end of the first book, Paul Atreides reluctantly leads a galactic war that will kill 61 billion people.
Lead them to paradise.
Paul accepts this war because his visions of the future tell him it's inevitable, it'll apparently be less bad than it could have been, and his position will help him protect his family. In other words, Paul chooses to do something he knows is immoral but views as the lesser of two evils. But in The Lord of the Rings, the idea of wielding a corrupt power toward a good result is controversial.
The ring is altogether evil.
It is a gift to the foes of Mordor. Why not use this ring? Give Gondor the weapon of the enemy. Let us use it against him.
There's no better example of this than Gandalf.
Take it, Gandalf. Take it.
No, Frodo, you cannot offer me this ring.
I'm giving it to you.
Don't tempt me, Frodo.
The same way Paul uses his power with good intentions, Gandalf would also,
I would use this ring from a desire to do good, but through me, it would wield a power too great and terrible to imagine.
But where Dune doesn't condemn Paul for his choice, Tolkien states that Gandalf claiming the ring would be among the worst things that could possibly happen. Quote, Gandalf as Ring Lord would have been far worse than Sauron. He would have remained righteous, but self-righteous. While Sauron multiplied evil, he left good clearly distinguishable from it. Gandalf would have made good detestable and seem evil. Despite The Lord of the Rings depicting some morally gray characters, Tolkien depicts morality itself as a binary of good versus evil. His heroes think in terms of the right choice, never the less bad choice. But where The Lord of the Rings depicts how heroes ought to be, Dune depicts how they can go wrong.
Now, it's my contention that the difference between a hero and an anti-hero is where you stop the story.
The book states that, quote, no more terrible disaster could befall your people than for them to fall into the hands of a hero. And so while Tolkien had no shortage of reasons to dislike Dune with some intensity, it's ironic that when it was released, critics said they, quote, know nothing comparable to it except The Lord of the Rings. Because despite their differences, Tolkien and Herbert were united, both through their level of detail and through the same goal they said was more important than any of these other intentions.
Well, I think it first has to be entertaining, because if it's not entertaining, nobody's going to read it. I put a pot of message in there with a mess of pottage.
And you're only concerned with making a story?
Which was my primary concern, which I started out with.
And you took 14 years to make the story?
Quite so, yes. That is partly out of the fact that I'm a meticulous sort of bloke.
I rarely disagree with Tolkien, but I like both books, with some intensity. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing for more.